I will now introduce our presenter, Dr. Adam Ingrao. He holds a BS in Agriculture and Plant Science from California Polytechnic State University and a PhD in Entomology from Michigan State University. He's the co-founder and national director for the Heroes to Hives program and an outreach specialist at Michigan Food and Farming Systems. Dr. Ingrao has been working in sustainable agriculture for 30 years and with honeybees professionally for 18 years, teaching beekeeping audiences around the world. He has published numerous peer-reviewed articles on agricultural topics and issues affecting farmer veterans and is a co-author of the textbook Honeybee Medicine for Veterinary Practitioner. I am going to turn this over to Dr. Ingrao and feel free to share your screen.
You should all be able to see my screen at this point, and I appreciate the invite to come back and do an encore presentation of this presentation that was given at the 2025 AgrAbility NTW in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And so today what we'll be talking about is Be Calm, Be Well, addressing veteran mental health through beekeeping. And this is a project that the Heroes to Hives program and the Hives program that is at the Department of Veterans Affairs has been working on for about the last 7 years. So myself, Valerie Carter, who you see listed as one of the authors here, is a recreational therapist at the Manchester VA and is the individual who leads the VA's Hives program. Lacey Ingrao is my partner and also the co-founder of Heroes to Hives and the owner of Beewise Farms, which is a partner on this project. Dr. Jesse Bennett is a professor of recreational therapy at the University of New Hampshire, and Christine Gould works in the research department at the VA at the Manchester VA as well. So these are all the individuals that have put this work together. And the way we'll kind of go through today's talk is that I'll start just briefly by introducing what Heroes to Hives is and what the Hives program is, and then we'll jump into some of the research that we've been doing on this topic, and then wrap up today with some of the actual practices that we utilize to help individuals that are veterans primarily as the audience we're working with, help them deal with mental health challenges through beekeeping. Now, I'll start by saying that this work, I truly believe, is applicable to just about anybody. So although the audience that we're working with is veterans and the research that we've done is with veterans themselves, I think that the work that we're doing here could be applicable to anybody with similar results. We are working on that, but as we do research, it often takes quite a lot of time to get that research and the data together to publish things. So I'll start with that, just saying that this work is primarily, I would think, applicable to anybody. So let's get started. We'll start with just kind of a capping of what Heroes to Hives is. So Heroes to Hives is the largest agriculture training program in the United States for military service members and their families. We celebrated our 10th year this year, going into our 11th next year. And what we are a science-based beginning beekeeping education course. Now, historically, for the last 10 years, the course has only been available to service members and their families. And the course is definitely developed for military service members. We have a lot of things in the course that are specific to military. But what we're doing this year for our 11th year is we're actually going to open up the program to everybody. So starting on January 1st, 2026, our YouTube channel will start hosting all of the lectures that we have available, and anybody can access those lectures. And the thought here is we're trying to basically create a community of skilled beekeepers because bees have been having a rough time. Last year, we had our largest historic loss in the United States in recorded history. And so education is important in beekeeping, just like it is in any ag industry, and we want to give that to everybody. To date, we've trained over 19,000 service members over those 10 years. And one of the reasons that we work in this realm of Be Calm, Be Well, these mental health programs, and with organizations like AgrAbility is from our student rosters. We know that 60% of the students that we work with have a service-connected disability, meaning a disability that happened while they were serving. So the vast majority of our students are dealing with disabilities, dealing with mental health challenges, and this is the reason why we work so closely with organizations like AgrAbility and the VA to offer these kind of services. The Hives program is the VA's beekeeping program, and that was established in 2019. It is based out of Manchester, New Hampshire, at the VA Medical Center there in Manchester. And there are several other places that this is happening currently. Now, the most established other VAs that have this program are the Oklahoma City VA, the Kansas City VA, and the Palo Alto VA. But there are many other VA hospitals that are coming on board with this program, where basically what's happening is that you're, as a veteran that's coming and getting services from the VA, if you are provided the opportunity to do rec therapy or occupational therapy, these particular hospitals have these programs, this Hives program, where you can actually do beekeeping as part of, say, recreational therapy. And basically what they're doing is they're using beekeeping as a therapeutic intervention. And these are evidence-based practices. The publication that I'm going to be sharing with you has established that the practices that we're doing are evidence-based. And so we're seeing real results with these particular practices we'll be talking about here in just a bit, where we're using bees as a modality for wellness, and primarily through mindful activities that we're incorporating in the bee yard. Now, as far as thinking about, this idea of bees and healthcare coming together, health and wellness, oftentimes we think of agriculture and health and wellness as being separate. Those of you that work in the ag industries and work in healthcare that are in this space as well, you know that getting your hands in the soil has therapeutic benefits. And we're not the only ones that have observed that. But I think that here in the modern era, we've gotten farther and farther away from understanding how the direct connection to nature can have positive impacts on individuals' health overall, and not just mental health. And in the traditions and the historical traditions of many different cultures, bees were really revered as something very, very special. In Egyptian traditions, which is where beekeeping actually began as a human activity, where we were actually managing honeybees, and that started in the first dynasty and ended with Cleopatra in the last dynasty of ancient Egypt. Bees were actually considered a gift from the sun god Ra. And so it was a direct connection to the divine through bees. And bees were seen as this almost, this connected to the divine creature, because it could go into a landscape and collect the nectar from the gods, literally the sun being converted into nectar into a plant. These insects were able to gather, and humans were able to reap the benefits of that by gathering honey from them. So it was a very important relationship. There were all sorts of spiritual activities happening around bees in ancient Egypt. We move into the Celtic traditions, and this is just a snapshot. You move into the Celtic traditions, and bees were actually seen as intermediaries between the world of the dead and the world of the living. And in many Celtic traditions, bees were actually seen as the souls of individuals that passed. This is something that's really interesting. And in a lot of the Celtic traditions, and even in many traditions to this day, the picture you see at the bottom right, which is entitled The Widow, that is a picture of a widow in a bee yard telling the bees that their master has passed away. And that is a tradition starting in Celtic traditions, where beekeepers had such a close relationship with their bees. The bees had to be notified of things like the death of their beekeeper. In Slovenian traditions, and this is something that's going on to this day, and in many Eastern European cultures, bees are seen as healers and are actually part of healthcare in a sense. So what you see here at the bottom left, this is a bed that is actually situated on top of two beehives. That's these two cabinets right here. Now, what you don't see in this picture is right next to this bed are 70 more of these cabinet-style beehives that we call Aja hives, which are the culturally significant hive in Slovenia. And basically, these bee houses that people go to in Slovenia, I actually slept in this bee house on this bed right here. And so you can go in and visit these places where you're sleeping with the bees or taking time with the bees for the aromatic therapy, so the air therapy, which is oftentimes used for things like asthma treatment. They also use sting therapy, so venom therapy, which is for things like arthritis. Lyme's disease is a really hot topic in venom therapy right now, because there's actually been a lot of work that's been done that shows that Lyme's disease can be put into remission with extensive sting therapy. So you can do something like that as well, but also the acoustic therapy as well. So all of these things that these bees offer really kind of lead one to believe that in traditions of past and even present, bees in the closeness that they have with humans, is something that is oftentimes overlooked, but can be revered, and humans can not only reap the benefits of harvesting honey and wax and things like that, but also the healthcare benefits of working with bees as well. And that's something that is, I think, a little out of the norm, but for those of you that work in research with animal therapy, this is something that's well established, that humans working with animals can have positive effects for both of them. And let's talk about that. So the reason that we kind of started on this path with the VA was, number one, we started kind of talking about the practices that we were developing as we called them therapeutic beekeeping. So it was beekeeping, but we were adding this therapeutic component to it. And the reason that we were doing that is because Heroes to Hives is an extensive amount of evaluation with our students. We evaluate them when they come into the program. We evaluate them when they go out of the program. And so we have thousands and thousands of data points from students that have taken the course over the last 10 years. The VA also keeps an extensive amount of data on the students that are going through their programs. And so they want to see what the outcomes are of these healthcare outcomes. And so for years, we kept talking with the VA, and we had all this anecdotal evidence. We had all these beekeepers that were telling us, oh, my anxiety's gone down. I don't feel depressed anymore. I don't feel lonely. I have a sense of purpose. But there was no research that actually showed any of that. And a lot of other organizations that work with veterans and bees that are all around the country, we're seeing the same things. And some of them, are saying that, bees are going to solve PTS, and others are, a little more cautious and saying the research not done yet. The reality is there was no research on this topic whatsoever in the literature, in the peer-reviewed literature. And so that's what really got us going, is that we couldn't find anything that was showing that any of these things were actually working, but we were getting all this anecdotal evidence from our students saying that they were having these amazing health outcomes. We also know, like I mentioned, that animal therapy is a well-established intervention. Equine therapy, canine therapy, there's even published research on humans working with seals and seeing positive mental health outcomes. So there's a lot of work in the literature that demonstrates that animal therapy works. Just nobody's worked with an insect yet. And so that's where we wanted to come in. And so we sought a collaboration together to see if we could establish beekeeping as an evidence-based therapy. So this concept of therapeutic beekeeping came about. And the way that we look at therapeutic beekeeping, kind of how we define it, is we're working beyond the limits of the personal identity to engage in a deeper way with our bees. So what we're really focusing on in the practices I'll be sharing with you are these concepts that you see listed here. So things like service and generosity, being in service to honeybees, or being in service to your animals on your farm, and being generous with those animals. That is a really fundamental thing that can change a lot of people. With just doing something as simple as serving a purpose other than yourself, get yourself out of your ego and into something different. And I know as farmers, if many of you are farmers, if you have livestock, we really have these close bonds with our livestock. I have these incredible bonds with my honeybees as well. And that's kind of what this is all about, is exploring these bonds that we could create far beyond the ego that we have ourselves. Another practice that we really focus on is gratitude. So gratitude, just being grateful for all of the things that bees give us, building that bond even closer by showing and understanding and verbalizing the importance that they play in our lives. Refining awareness. So we're refining the awareness of individuals really related to nature. And I should have said this in the beginning. Lacey, on this project, her background is in transpersonal psychology and nature-based therapies. So the idea of people getting closer to nature to help them deal with their own personal struggles. That's where the refining awareness comes in. I cannot tell you how many students I have had go through our course that they start to see the world in a completely different way. And it's mainly because when they're so focused on their insects, they're so focused on supporting their honeybees, now they're worried about the ecosystem at large. They're worried about the pesticides that are being put into the ecosystem. So it changes their entire framework of awareness around nature. They are now much more in tune with what's happening in their environment because they have an organism they're working with that is affected by everything in the environment. Cultivating wisdom. One of the most powerful things we can do as individuals to give to other people is to provide wisdom to them, helping them cultivate their own wisdom through learning, through understanding, and learning a new skill like beekeeping. Most of the students that I work with have never worked in agriculture before in their lives. Beekeeping is the first thing that they're doing that's even remotely related to agriculture. And being able to cultivate that wisdom, being able to get them to come back to the land and understand that wisdom is something incredible that we can give them through things like therapeutic beekeeping. Redirecting motivation. A lot of times, especially with service personnel, I'm an Army veteran myself, like getting out of the military and trying to find the motivation that you had when you were in a unit where it was a whole unit was motivating together. We were doing missions together. Everything was so important in that unit. It's hard when you're out and now you're all on your own. And so redirecting motivation to something that's positive, like protecting the most important managed pollinator on the planet, honeybees, that is something that a lot of people can get behind. And so redirecting that motivation to get people excited about something again. And then also managing emotions. Working with honeybees is a constant lesson in mindfulness. If you're not being mindful, if you're not paying attention to what's going on, if you're thinking about other things, you're letting the stories run wild in your head, you're going to get sloppy, you're going to get stung, and it brings you right back to the whole thing of, hey, I need to be present. I need to be here. So managing emotions through being able to work with another organism and being able to deal with those big emotions that might come up and might take us away, the bees can bring us right back, right to the present. And that's part of this whole mindfulness practice. All right, so these are the practices that we have developed with the VA, and I'll first name off the practices and then we're going to go through the research here for just a little bit. So the practices that we've developed and that we've done research on are breathing and grounding practices, guided imagery, so not getting in the bee yard, but just going through like what working in the bee yard would look like, sensory exploration, where we explore the 5 senses in a beekeeping context, yoga for beekeepers, creating and crossing a threshold, bee bathing, communing with bees, active meditation while working bees, and steps of gratitude. So these are the practices that we're going to be kind of discussing for the rest of the talk today. But first, let's talk about the research. So if you're interested in this article, it was in the, I believe it was the annual for 2024 of the Therapeutic Recreation Journal. The title of the article, Healing Hives, Exploring the Effects of Beekeeping on Veteran Mental Health and Quality of Life. If you are interested in a copy of this article, because I don't believe it's public yet, they have, I think, a 2-year period where it is not available to the public. You have to have a subscription. But as an author, I can provide copies. So at the end of this, I will have my email address. And if this is something that you're interested in having, I mean, it's a true research paper. If that's something that excites you, drop me a line and I'll send you a copy of this because it's not available right now. But I'm going to give you the short and sweet of the results of this particular paper. So the methods that we used for this paper, we in 2022, during the entire beekeeping season, I see somebody putting their email in there. Please email me. I'm not going to take the notes off of the chat. I don't want to get those lost in there. So make sure you email me at my email at the back end of this presentation. So in 2022, the beekeeping season, we conducted pre and post surveys with veterans that were participating in the VA's therapeutic beekeeping program, the Hives program at Manchester, New Hampshire. And the program goals of this research and of this program in general were to learn and improve skills in beekeeping. So obviously we're working with bees, and that's one of the goals we want people to get is a little bit of experience working with bees. We want to improve the quality of life and overall wellness was one of the goals. We wanted to see increases in self-esteem through building leisure and recreation skills, and that's something to think about, that you may want to be able to, have some other skills as well. And then we wanted to also see if we could connect communities with beekeepers or individuals with beekeeping communities. And this is a place where this common interest can increase social connectedness. So veterans in general, coming out of the military, oftentimes it's very difficult for individuals to reassimilate. You may have gone and done 3 or 4 tours in Afghanistan or Iraq. You've seen some crazy stuff. You've got a lot of moral injury. oftentimes veterans will isolate themselves when they're dealing with these types of things because they feel like nobody will understand. And so giving somebody a hobby or a career where they have a, a constant source of individuals that can basically increase their awareness in things and increase their connection in things, the beekeeping industry at large, that is what we were trying to do in this work. Decreasing feelings of isolation by connecting with other veterans and increasing coping skills and stress, or coping skills for stress, anxiety, and depression through program participation. So that's what we were looking at in this particular program. The way that we assessed the health outcomes of this particular research study. So we used a standardized research a tool called the EQ5D5L, which is a survey tool that's used to basically look at 5 dimensions of health and an overall health score. So the way that this works is that individuals come in, before they even get in a bee suit and work with bees, they take this survey. It's a 5 questions, or well, 6 question survey with the 5 health dimensions. They fill out the survey and then they do the activity, and then we give them the survey again after the activity is done. So what we looked at was mobility. So did mobility improve or decrease because of this activity? Self-care. Was their self-care better or worse after this? Our usual activities, could they do their usual activities after this exercise working with bees, or did it reduce the amount of usual activities it could do? Did it increase or decrease pain? Did it increase or decrease anxiety and depression? And then did it increase or decrease your overall perception of your overall health? And so that is where we can get the evaluation piece of this from. All right, so these are the results right here. And the first result I'm going to point to is mobility. I'm only going to go through the ones that were statistically significant, which were mobility and anxiety and depression, and the overall health score, which is the VAS score. So with mobility, what we looked at is did the activity make them more or less mobile? In actuality, it significantly decreased their mobility by about 7.5%. And that's an interesting result. It is it's not what we would hope for is that, veterans who already have disabilities because they're seeking treatment through the VA for these things, but we wouldn't want to increase those disabilities just because of a beekeeping activity. Now, we've done a lot of thinking about why the result came out the way it did. And I am a firm believer that the result is a reflection of the style of beehive that we use in the United States, which is the Langstroth hive, which is a physically intensive hive to use. So we believe that maybe if we were to use a more accessible hive, like a long Langstroth hive, which is a horizontal hive that requires no lifting. And that's, for those of you that are not familiar with the Langstroth hive, that is the big thing with the Langstroth hive. It's a great hive as far as the modular nature of it, but it is very difficult on the body because you're constantly moving boxes that are anywhere from 20 to 90 pounds. You're lifting and twisting all the time. That is the motion that we use in that industry. And so it causes a lot of back injuries. And we even have things called beekeeper's back in our industry, which are basically all the back problems you get from beekeeping for a long time. So we know that this is a problem in the industry, and we think that that's being reflected in this data. And so what we'll be looking at in the future is alternative hive styles, say like the Slovenian Aja hive that requires no lifting, or a long Langstroth hive, which is a horizontally oriented hive that requires no lifting. If that were incorporated in this, would we see these same results? But that's what we saw here. The big result that we saw that was an incredible improvement, you see almost a 31% improvement in anxiety and depression symptoms. This is incredibly significant. With the individuals that we worked with, to see this kind of a result, over 30% reduction, there's not a lot of simple exercises that you can do with a veteran suffering from anxiety and depression that can see that kind of result. And so that was an incredible result that we weren't, like I said, we heard this anecdotally for a very long time from not just our program, but from many other programs. But I can definitely say that through this research, we can now say that this is actually something that is happening. We are seeing massive reductions in anxiety and depression when veterans are working with honeybees in this kind of setting that is a controlled setting. It's not just we're going in working with honeybees, we're doing these mindful practices, then working with honeybees, and then taking these surveys. So it's a combination of both working with bees, but also using these mindfulness practices to get much closer to the organism. The other result that we saw that was significant was we saw almost a 10% improvement in their overall perception of their general health, which is a great improvement as well. To see that kind of improvement, almost 10%, and how people are perceiving their overall health just by working with bees, that's a pretty great result. So those are the results that we saw in the study that we did. And I'll tell you this, when it comes to studies I've worked in the research, I've worked in academia for almost 2 decades. And what I can tell you is seeing something like this on a first run with a research study. This was a pilot study. We're again continuing this research now and continuing to collect data so that we can publish more in-depth papers on this and really kind of start to sort out things. So, would this happen? Would we see these same results outside of the VA? Would we see these same results with non-veterans? Like I said in the beginning, I believe that that's the case, but there's no research to support that. So that's why we need to do this work so that these types of therapies can be available to more people. All right, so the last part of this lecture that we're going to do is I'm just going to briefly go through the practices and kind of what they are so that you can get a sense of kind of what we're actually doing to get these kind of results with veterans. Now, I will say this, if you are interested in being and working with individuals doing this kind of work, we will be providing professional training on this this year in June and July. In June, we'll be doing trainings at the end of the month. You'll have to email me to get the exact dates, but we'll be doing trainings in New Hampshire at the VA. It's going to be a 2-day training where you can come and get actual real training so that you can be able to do this with an audience. So you can come and get trained in these practices there, or in July, we will be having the same training in Michigan as well at my personal farm, where we'll be doing these practices as well and showing you how to do these practices. We also have a lot of support materials for the individuals that will be training. So if that's something you're interested in, again, email me at adam@myths.org. I saw Tess put that in there earlier. Tess, I appreciate that. All right, so let's talk about the practices. So I'm going to kind of do these out of order because I saved 2 practices at the end where I'm going to show you some videos of the actual practices. And then at the end of this lecture, there's a QR code that you can scan that will bring you to our YouTube channel that has all of these practices in video form so that you can see what they all look like. All right, so the first part of this is sensory exploration that we'll talk about. And this is really in where we are kind of diving into the 5 senses. This is something that's done outside of the apiary, so we're maybe close to the apiary, but we're not in the apiary with the bees. And this is also something that we tend to do on like days where we have clients that are coming together we were thinking we're going to go out into the apiary and we get rained out or something like that. And so this is also something you can do indoors. It is a true visualization exercise, but we're focused on the 5 senses that we would be the senses that we would be having while we were working with live bees. So for example, we're sitting in a room, we'll do some breathing exercises, and then we'll visually bring you into an apiary. We'll bring you through the process of opening a beehive. And the first thing that we're going to bring your attention to is the smell. And so the smell is something that is really a key part of being a beekeeper. In fact, many of our diagnostic tools that we use based on our nose for things like American foul brood and European foul brood. So that is something to keep in mind, is that an exercise like this, we not only are enticing the senses, but we can also use as an educational activity to teach people a little bit more about bees. So that is one exercise that we can do, and we'll take them through the 5 senses: the touch of the bees, the sound of the bees, the taste of honey, all of those great things. And this is what we can use as a grounding exercise even before we enter the beehives. So it kind of prepares the mind for what's going on as you are getting ready to move into the bee yard as well. So with a lot of times when you think about working with individuals with honeybees, not everybody's a beekeeper, and not all of the people who take our programs want to be a beekeeper, but they want to experience bees. And so this is a way for individuals that may be a little timid around bees, a little scared of bees, to kind of ease them into working with bees. So if we do a visualization and start talking about all these wonderful things that bees are going to heighten your senses on, that sometimes can really kind of ground you before moving into an apiary, even if you're not someone who keeps bees. Yoga for beekeepers. This is something we do outside of the apiary. This is tapping into the body and really seeing how it feels. Beekeeping is very physical. I had mentioned the Langstroth hive. This is me, and I'm not a very tall guy. I'm only 5'7", but this is 9 boxes of honey right here, and well, a couple boxes of brood. But you've got several hundred pounds of honey on this particular colony right here. And in order for me to get down to the bottom, down here where the business is, when I do my inspections, I need to be in that brood chamber looking for things like mites and things like that. I've got to remove every single one of these boxes. These medium boxes, when they are full, can weigh up to 45, 50 pounds. So that is oftentimes where a lot of injury comes in when it comes to working bees. So tapping into how the body feels is something really important. Just like you would stretch before a workout, you should be stretching before you move into the apiary as well. And so what this does is it prepares the body for working in the apiary. And we provide a few basic yoga poses. You don't need to be a yoga master. You just need to have a little mobility in your body. And even if you don't have a lot of mobility, doing these stretches is going to help you when you're in that apiary. It also allows us to slow the mind and focus on the present. So many times we are in this, rush lifestyle, and we just can't slow the mind down. You move into an apiary when you're just all running, all cylinders going and just thinking about all sorts of things that went on, or someone upset you at work, or Johnny was, bad at high school, or something like that. That all is you're going to bring that into the apiary with you. And the bees are going to know, and they're going to feel that energy coming off you, and it's not going to be a pleasant experience. And so slowing the mind, focusing on the task at hand, being present with the bees, being with your bees. That is such an important concept. And that is part of doing the yoga practice, is slowing you down so that you can be ready to work with those bees. Crossing a threshold. So this is moving into the apiary. So this is a practice that those in the military are very familiar with. Thresholds are used all the time in the military to signify major events, or moving into a new unit, or moving on to a new base. You cross that that fence line, moving on to a new base. You are crossing a threshold into something new, and a total new reality is what it basically is. This is like the same type of things that people are, when you do graduation, you cross that threshold and get your diploma, or when you're getting married, you cross the proverbial threshold and now you're married, and those types of things. These are things that we use to signify important events, are these thresholds. And this comes into a concept of rites of passage as well. Now, what we try to do with this in the context of beekeeping is we try to create a space, a physical space where you can say, okay, I'm leaving this world and I'm moving into the world of the bees. I'm moving into my apiary. And it can be as extravagant or minimal as you want, but the idea here is that you are acknowledging what is happening, and it gives you the opportunity to set an intention or give a little bit of gratitude to that organism before you move into it. This is something that can be very impactful. I do this practice every time I work with my bees. I have a threshold, I ring a bell, I give them gratitude, I set an intention for what I'm going to be doing. It allows me to move in with purpose. It allows me to move in without carrying all the baggage from the day behind, because I am moving in by setting these intentions, setting gratitude. I am changing the feeling of what is happening. And then I have a physical thing that I'm moving over, whether it be a fence line. This is an example of one of my small altars. So I'll sit and give thanks to the bees. I have some honey that I'm offering them. I have a little bit of lavender you see on there. This is something that I do in my own practice. And it's something that we use in the Be Calm, Be Well practice as well. There's this idea of setting intention, giving gratitude, and using a threshold to do that. Bee bathing. This can be done in the apiary or in a landscape. And this is not a new concept. This is based on forest bathing, which is a very well-established concept of immersing yourself in nature and being observant of the world around you, really being present, being mindful of where you are, being conscious of the moment. This allows you to focus on bees and other insects. And this is my wife, Lacey, here sitting in a landscape. This is Takane buckwheat that we grow here on the farm, which is a Himalayan buckwheat. So it's pink instead of your typical white. But she's sitting there and just observing. And it's an immersive activity. You can observe the behaviors of these insects. You can observe the movements of these insects, listen to the sounds that they're making, listen to the sounds of nature. But the idea here is this is immersing yourself in nature, and you are just being observant of what's going on around you. You're not thinking about what happened earlier in the day. You're not, upset at your partner. You're just being present in this landscape. And this can also be done in the apiary. Oftentimes I'll sit in front of a beehive and just watch bees coming in and out for 10, 15, 20 minutes just to connect and just to really get close to them and start to decompress. So another practice that we do. One of the other practices that we do is communing with the bees, and this is done in the apiary. This is something that is also not a new practice and is based on a Celtic practice known as telling the bees. We're calling it communing with the bees. But telling the bees is a Celtic tradition because the Celts felt that the bees were messengers. They felt that they were an intermediary between the land of the living and the dead. And so giving messages, speaking to them, telling the bees about major events in your lives, your struggles, your triumphs, transitions that were happening that were major things, giving messages to your ancestors. These types of things were what bees were used for. And this is a connection that you can build with these bees. This is kind of like just talking it out to yourself. The bees are, they're going to not give you verbal confirmation of the things that are happening to you, but this is a way to get things out. Now, from a veteran perspective, I have worked with a lot of veterans over the years, and I mean, tens of thousands. And one thing that I can say that happens very frequently with veterans that I work with in bee yards is that oftentimes when we start working with each other, it is all about learning how to work with bees. But usually after about, I don't know, 6 or 7 times that we work together with the bees, veterans start maybe opening up a little bit more. And I've had some really tough conversations over bees about moral injury because of something that, someone had to do because of a mission or, something that happened in the military, losing a battle buddy that was just a completely traumatic event. Oftentimes, these are not things that people open up about. And I've seen people open up about these things in an apiary. The way that this can work also is these things that you find so hard to speak, the events that you've experienced, the things that you've seen that you struggle to put words to. The bees are a great listener. You can tell them anything that has happened to you, and they're not going to react. They're not going to judge. And I think that's the big thing that a lot of veterans struggle with is the judgment, especially when, we go to, a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and many of those people have no idea the experience that you had in service. And so this is an opportunity to really let go of some of those really heavy things with your bees. This is also an opportunity to just listen, sit, meditate with those bees, be with the bees, and just listen to what's going on inside of you. Think about just drawing awareness to the emotions that come up. This is an opportunity for that. So that's the communing with the bees practice. Active meditation in the apiary. So this is actually working a live beehive, and this is something that we facilitate. So a lot of these practices are things that you can do on your own. And some of these practices we facilitate in groups. But this one is one, I mean, obviously you can do this one with or without a facilitator, but it is nice having somebody walk you through this process so that you can just really be focused on the task at hand. This is a practice in mindfulness, and what it is focused on is drawing awareness to the moment that you're in. So breathing is part of this activity. And basically how we start is we start with grabbing your hive tool. Everybody moves up to a hive. You grab your hive tool. A lot of times we'll have individuals set their hands on the beehive just for a few seconds, just to feel the vibration and the energy that's coming off of these beehives. I mean, a beehive that is, average size during the middle of the season, you're talking 60 to 80,000 bees in that hive. So there's a lot going on in there, and you can definitely feel it. And so we'll start with that. We'll have them slowly open the hive. We'll have them actually run their hands over the bees so that they can see the reaction of the bees as they're slowly moving their hands, and the bees are acutely aware of what's going on. So that brings a little more attention to the fact that, hey, the bees are paying attention to me just like I'm paying attention to them. We will then move through pulling a couple frames. we'll taste honey, we'll pet the bees, bees that are on a brood frame. We will actually run our hands right over top of them so that you can actually get a feel for the bees as well. And so this is a practice in just intention and mindful movement. So this methodical movement that we go through as we're doing this practice. This usually takes about 15 or 20 minutes, but we basically pull out a few frames. We might remove a box and pull out a few more frames. The intention here is not to do a hive inspection or anything like that. It's just to bring closeness to the bees and more observation to what's going on so that you are fully aware and connected with the bees at that moment. Steps of gratitude. This is something that we do in or out of the apiary. And this is a real simple practice there's been a lot written about gratitude practices. And this is one that we practice a lot on our farm with all of our livestock. So like when we're culling chickens or culling ducks, we always do a gratitude walk with those ducks before, or chickens before we cull them. But this is something that we do with a lot of what's happening on our personal farm. And so what this is basically doing is, basically taking intentional steps and it kind of like a meditative walk where with each step you're giving thanks, you're giving gratitude, whether it be to the bees, to the land around you, whatever it is that's in nature that you are feeling grateful for. This increases positive emotions. It's been shown in a lot of research to improve health outcomes. It builds stronger relationships with you and the organism that you're working with, and not just trying to, squash feelings. It's tough culling animals. There's no doubt about that. That's one of the hardest parts about farming, especially if you're a small scale farmer. But, it's a necessary part of what we do for food. And so just building those relationships and giving more gratitude to these organisms helps a lot with those feelings that we have when we're going through that process of taking a life or when we're caring for things like bees. It also helps deal with adversity as well. All right, breathing practices. So this is something we do outside of the apiary. And how we breathe, it impacts so many things in us. So it impacts our nervous system. It impacts our emotions. We've all heard of just take a few deep breaths when you're upset. It's very true. The breath is a very powerful thing that we have. Helps with anxiety, stress, also mental clarity. And we do two different breathing practices. We do diaphragmatic breathing and we do bee breathing, which is called Brahmari pranayama. Bee breathing is based on the Indian black bee, and so it's a practice that was developed in India with that particular bee. And I'm going to actually show you the video that we have for that, the instructional video, right now. So let's do this. And Tess, if this does not work, will you just let me know in the chat and I'll skip ahead? You all should be able to hear. Awesome.
Today we are going to do a bee breathing exercise, or Brahmari pranayama. Pranayama is a yogic practice of focusing on the breath. Brahmari is a goddess of the bees named after the black Indian bee. The exhalation in this pranayama resembles the typical sound of a bee, hence it is known as humming bee breath, and can help to relieve tension, anxiety, and anger. It can also help to calm an agitated mind. We will begin by making sure we are in a stable spot and closing our eyes if it feels right for us, or allowing our eyes to relax and not focusing on anything. Now, bring your index fingers to the cartilage between your cheek and your ear without entering the ear canal, resting on that cartilage. Take a deep breath in through your nose, and as you exhale slowly through your mouth, making a humming sound. You can make low-pitched sounds, or it is also good to make high-pitched sounds. You can gently press on the cartilage to open and close the ear, or just keep it closed or open. Continue to do this for 6 breaths. Allowing your eyes to be relaxed or closed, and taking a few moments to observe the sensations in your body and the quietness within.
Okay, So that was the bee breath practice that we developed. And so you can see kind of that how these practices work. They're not really intensive practices. These are things that anybody can incorporate into their regular schedule of working with bees. So if you do have bees, these can be something really simple, takes a few minutes to do before you enter the apiary, and really can allow you to really decompress before you get in and work with these venomous insects that, like I said earlier, when you come in with a lot of baggage, they're going to let you know, because you're not going to be focused on them. You're not going to be focused on good hive handling skills. You're going to be crushing bees. You're going to be making everybody angry, and it's not going to be a fun experience for anybody. Taking a little bit of time, a few minutes to do one of these practices and move into a bee yard can have a big impact, and that's what we've seen in our research as well. All right, so the next one that I have here is guided imagery. So this is done outside of the hive, and I have this fancy video here just to show you some moving bees, I guess, that I put in there. So this is basically going through the full visualization of working through a beehive. And I'm going to show you a video of this one as well. I think we've got a little bit of time for that. So this will be the last practice that we talk about. But basically, this provides a frame of reference. So like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people come into these types of programs, they're a little timid because they're not beekeepers. I'd say 90% of the people that do the Heroes to Hives program have never touched a bee in their life. And so there is a little bit of anxiety and some uncertainties that go along with working with venomous insects. We all have these preconceived notions about how bad a bee sting feels. In actuality, it's really not that bad. So there's a lot of anxiety that can arise from that. And so we use this particular practice, this guided imagery practice, to really kind of set the stage. So for those people who don't like to go into unexpected situations, where they don't know what to expect, this is to really kind of set their mind at ease. So this is a guided visualization, and I'll show you a video of what this looks like as well.
I'm now going to lead you through a short guided imagery to prepare you for going into the beehives and the hive inspection. Take a moment now to get in a comfortable position. It can either be standing up or sitting down. Feel free to move and readjust your body at any time. Let's begin by imagining that you have your bee suit on, the smoker is lit, and you are getting ready to go into the hives. You have your hive tool in one hand, feeling the hard metal against your glove. You lean over to pick up the smoker off the ground where it's resting, and you smell the scent of the pine needles burning in the smoker. As you walk toward the hive, you notice the sounds of the hive, the gentle buzzing of the bees as they go about their work. You stop for a moment in front of the hive to watch the ladies coming and going, flying in with their little pouches of pollen on their back legs in colors of yellow, orange, and gray. You notice the bees coming in, landing quickly on the entrance board, and going into the hives. As you watch, bees are also exiting the hive, taking off from the entrance, flying high before heading off in one direction or another. Make your way to the back of the hive, placing the smoker next to the hive, getting ready to lift the outer cover. You gently lift the outer cover, hearing the soft crack of the propolis separating when you lift the cover. The bees are calm and there's no need to use your smoker right now. You place the outer cover on the side and gently slide your hive tool under the inner cover, turning it gently to release the propolis. You take a moment to check for the queen before placing the cover down on the side. Before going any further, you take some time to observe the bees, listening, feeling the vibrations from the hive. Now, taking in a deep breath, you smell the scent of honey and wax. You decide to remove the frame starting in position 10. With each frame you pull, you take note of what you see, how much honey, nectar, pollen, eggs, larvae, and capped brood. You are aware of what you smell: honey, wax, and pheromones. You notice what you feel, the vibrations from the buzzing bees, the weight of the frames, the weight of the boxes, the breeze on your skin, and the temperatures of the air. You notice the sounds around you, the humming from the hive, the buzzing of the individual bees. You continue to lift and examine the frames in the hive, keeping your attention on what you are doing and your awareness of all of the sensations you are experiencing. It is now time to close up the hive in our mind by returning the frames to the boxes, putting the inner cover back on, repositioning the outer cover, and bringing our attention back to the spot where we are standing or sitting. When you are ready, bring your awareness back to the area where you're standing or sitting. Feel your feet resting on the ground, your arms resting by your sides. When you're ready, begin to wiggle your fingers and toes, stretching your arms, opening your eyes, bringing your awareness back to this space. Now you can pick up the bee suit on the ground in front of you and put it on to get ready to go into the hives.
All right, so that's a sample of the two of the practices. Those are the instructional videos that we use as part of our professional development training that we are currently doing with individuals within the VA and external to the VA who are beekeeping educators or clinicians working within the VA. Like I said earlier, if you're interested in learning more about this, you can email me at adam@miffs.org. That's going to be on the last slide here. And we can definitely chat about when these events will take place. If you are going to the NTW this year, we're planning on, well, I will be there one of the days and we'll be talking about this as well. If you want to chat at that point, or feel free, like I said, to drop me an email and I can get you more information on how you can become trained in this. So in conclusion, and before I get started, the QR code that you see here, if you scan that QR code, it will bring you right to our YouTube channel and to the playlist with all the videos of each of these practices. So if you want to do that, feel free to scan that QR code. So in conclusion for today, therapeutic beekeeping interventions can reduce anxiety and depression in veterans. We've seen that in our research. We have a peer-reviewed publication that shows that. And so this is something that is real. This is no longer something that's just anecdotal. Beekeeping as an intervention may decrease mobility. And so one of the things that I talked about was alternative hive styles. And you actually saw it there in that last video, several different hive styles. You saw some long Langstroth hives. You saw some Kenyan top bar hives there. And then you saw traditional Langstroth hives. So all of these different alternative hive styles, I definitely believe can help with that mobility aspect. We are putting in 15 Aja hives here at my farm this year, specifically to work with individuals on that. And so you can see that there is need for replication. We need more research on this type of stuff so that we understand what's going on. We did see veterans have improvements in overall health. We're interested to see if we see the same thing outside the VA, and definitely professional training is needed for clinical staff and beekeeping educators to incorporate this into their professional career. There is a lot more to this, especially with considerations for how the apiary is set up when you're working with people with disabilities. And so that's something to think about as well. All right, that's what I've got today. And I'll put the last slide up there so you have my email address.
Thank you, Adam. There were a couple of questions in the chat. One was, how about working with solitary bees?
I mean, that would be fine. I mean, you can use a solitary nest, but there's just not the number of bees, and you don't work solitary bees. The only bees that you work are bees that work in community. And so, if you are working with solitary bees, you're basically going to be sitting and watching the bees. You can incorporate some of these other practices, but like doing a meditation while you're actively working a solitary hive is not something that you would do. So it could work in a landscape if you've got some solitary, hotels, but typically when we're working with these large numbers of bees, that's where you're going to get the hands-on piece of it with working in a hive.
Okay. There was another comment. It says, I have spinal issues. If you need people with back issues to help determine safe practices for people with spinal damage, I'd be more than happy to participate.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we've got a lot of students that have spinal issues. That's one of the main issues coming out of the military is spinal issues.
Okay. And then is decorating the hives part of the intervention?
I love that question, Dakota, and 100%. Art therapy is definitely something that we would actively support, and definitely have a lot of students in our courses that are artists. And so, yes, absolutely, decorating the hives is part of could be part of the intervention.
All right. Other than some wonderful comments of thanking you and great information, that is all I see in there. If anybody else has a question, feel free to type it in really quick. Otherwise, as you exit, there will be some just some quick evaluation questions if you wouldn't mind answering so that we can continue to improve our webinars. So, Adam, thank you again. I appreciate you doing this presentation for us the second time.
Thank you, Tess, for having me. Appreciate it.
And we will see you in March.
Yes, I'm excited about you all being in Michigan. First time I haven't had to travel a long ways for the NTW, so I'm looking forward to it.
Exactly. So, yes, and anybody else that's interested, there is information on the agrability.org website. If you go under our trainings tab, you can learn more about our national training workshop. That'll be in March in Traverse City, Michigan. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Have
everybody.
a great day, everyone.